Welcome to the Good Reading Magazine podcast. Good Reading is a monthly magazine dedicated to books and reading and aims to help readers discover their next favourite book. You can find out more about the books discussed on today's podcast at goodreadingmagazine.com.au.
I pick up my phone to take a photo. Something from the farm to post on Instagram, a declaration. Look at my new surroundings. Perhaps if I post that the farm is idyllic, it might start to feel that way. I pull on my gumboots at the stairs and tread softly across the front lawn. As I get closer, I marvel at how big the kangaroos are. Their front arms dangle, claws for fingers on each paw, eyes large and round and framed with the longest eyelashes. Their ears stick up as straight as television antenna. So many gathered in a single group, like a family. I'm halfway across the lawn when they move in formation, huddling in a straight line. They stare at me, unmoving, and as I raise the phone to take a photo, a long scream rents the air. In unison, they leap away. My mind takes several moments to catch up. I fumble my phone and whip around to face the house. My eyes run over every window, every door, but there is nothing and no one to see. Rusty, however, is standing at attention, his eyes focused on the attic window, sniffing the air furiously. Trembling, I snap a photo of him. He's fixed in place, every hackle on his neck raised.
Jessica Mansour-Nahra holds degrees in history and law and was a communications consultant and writer in Brisbane, London and Sydney, before tree changing to a hamlet in Wiradjuri country. Today I'm joined by Jessica Mansour-Nahra to talk about her first novel, The Farm. Jessica, welcome to the Good Reading Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
The Farm is set in and around a farmhouse with a rather dark history, along with a cast of equally disturbing or disturbed characters. It's been described as an eerie psychological thriller with the gothic undertones of Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca. But did your writing journey begin with any of those ideas in mind?
I think that my writing journey began when I was very young. Like a lot of writers, you learn to read and you're entranced by reading, and the notion that you could be a writer yourself is really enticing. So I used to write short stories about anything and everything. But of course, when you become a teenager, you do get a little bit interested in, gothic sort of themes because you study Wuthering Heights at school. Toxic and passionate relationships seem really exciting when you're 15. So I think it was always in the back of my mind. The first novel I wrote was actually a historical book, but it did include a mystery. And so I think the common thread for me is that I do love a puzzle to figure out when I'm reading other people's books. And certainly when I'm writing one, I find that the suspense and the mystery and the conflict that goes along with that and having characters who are at odds with each other, I find really compelling. I think the Gothic themes came into it because when I moved out here to O'Connell, I live in the same place where the book is set. The isolation was so beautiful, but at the same time, it could feel quite foreboding. And so I remember thinking to myself, this is the perfect setting for a Gothic novel. And that's really what inspired me to then specifically give the Australian Gothic genre a go.
I think you've just coined a new term, Australian Gothic.
I hope so, because I really do feel like it's different from other cultural Gothic literature traditions, particularly given the very difficult history that Australia has had with colonisation. And I think given our landscape as well being such a tough one and the most deadly animals in the world are all here and our weather is so extreme that I just think it lends itself beautifully to a Gothic tradition.
Now, The Farm begins with a miscarriage. It's very direct in its description and firmly rooted in the reality of that experience. It's a very disconcerting opening, and it feels like it might be something very personal to you.
Absolutely, it is personal to me, and it's personal to so many women. It's such a common experience. It's a difficult one to talk about. Close friends of mine have had miscarriages we haven't talked about until I wrote this book. I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine and we really unpacked both our miscarriages together, because I had said to her, you know, someone asked me, you're writing this book and haven't you spoken to your friends about it? And I was, no. And it was a really teary conversation. I think we feel such a sense of failure when you have a miscarriage, because being pregnant is literally the most brimming with possibility you can probably be, physically and emotionally, that when it doesn't work out, you feel such a sense of failure. I wanted to open the book with the miscarriage, specifically to make it as clear as possible how difficult it is for women, how we're expected to just do it and keep working and not talk about it and go on. And I also had an idea with the novel that it would be a really uncomfortable reading experience in some ways, in the sense of, I think it will resonate deeply with some women and their experiences. And I wanted to start that uncomfortable opening straight away. I wanted to say to readers, I'm going to reflect back some of the more difficult things that we as women go through. I didn't want to write around it, because I felt that was an issue that we've had generally in culture, is talking around our losses and not staring them in the face.
Your central character, Leila, is recovering not only from that miscarriage, but also from some painful surgery. And she's medicated for it, including endone, Valium, among other things. It should come as no surprise that she's suffering from anxiety and depression. Leila somehow looks forward to feeling nothing, and even resorts to asking Dr. Google, why am I unhappy?
It really breaks my heart for Leila. There's millions of reasons why men and women, all people, are affected by mental health struggles. For Leila in particular, the miscarriage was a trigger for her, but she had mental health problems, I think, for a long time before that because of her upbringing. And she wasn't able to understand it. And I think part of the big journey for her is really looking inward and probably having to assess and understand why she feels the way she does. What are the events in her life that have led her to feel that way, and that she can no longer turn away from it because it's led her into the path of danger, essentially. The Google search, why am I unhappy? I mean, I've personally been there before. Sometimes when you find yourself in a place in life that you think, well, I've got a great job and I'm earning great money and I've got great friends, but I don't have this or I don't have that. I don't think I feel very happy, and I should. And so it just seemed like this thing that Leila, who's so practical, might do, is that she would turn to Dr. Google, because she doesn't have anyone to ask that she would trust and say, what is wrong with me? Because that's the question she's really asking. What is so wrong with me? And why am I feeling so different to other people? And of course, she could answer that question for herself, but she's not willing to look back on her life and go there yet. So Dr. Google it was.
The Farm is written in the first person, with Leila as the narrator. She feels like a rather unreliable narrator, plagued by doubt and anxiety. She's emotionally fragile. She's got a drug dependency, which made me wonder, is her worldview trustworthy?
We tend to expect and see women in life and in fiction as unreliable narrators. I feel that way. I think not all the time, but I think often we question women about their reported experiences. And I think to myself, well, what if you just believed her? What if you just trusted her in her experience? Why is there this sense of trying to find evidence for something? Or why, when a woman speaks up in a meeting or a woman reports a negative experience that happened to her, why do we have to back ourselves up until there's no doubt whatsoever, like we're in a court of law? I found that concept interesting. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time. And so when I wrote Leila, I thought, I'm going to make her as unreliable as possible, because we already have that. I'm going to add in some logical reasons so people can feel good about making her unreliable to themselves. She has a drug dependency. She's on Valium. She's an unhappy person. She's responding in strange ways to a partner that seems really supportive to her. I fully expect readers to feel frustrated with Leila at many points throughout the book, but I also want readers to, after they're finished reading, ask themselves why they found her so unreliable. If you take away the obvious reasons I've given you, would you find her unreliable or reliable? So it's just a bit of a journey I want readers to go on. And I've made it as difficult for them as possible, but as enjoyable as possible, because I think if there's too many easy answers in a book, it's not as compelling and it's not as exciting to read. So the question readers will be asking themselves undoubtedly is she reliably reporting these things that are happening to her, or is she experiencing something because of her history, because of her medication? Maybe she's histrionic in some way. And I think it takes quite a long time, hopefully, for readers to make that decision. And when they do, it's all too late. So
following that miscarriage and that surgery, James, her partner, proposes a period of rest, nesting and recovery at the family farm, the farm, part of a tree change, which all seems like a good enough idea. But Leila's first impressions suggest a potentially different reality.
Leila at the start of the book and throughout is in a very negative headspace. And so things that could be beautiful, she's interpreting as isolated, haunting, not welcoming in some ways. There's a beautiful drive that they take through Taranah, which is a place on the way to O'Connell. And it's a bit of a tricky road. There's a few tight corners, but it's a beautiful drive. And you see these incredibly stunning hills and mountains and poplars and these beautiful sort of corrugated rusted sheds and ruins. And it's a drive I've always really loved. And I thought, what would Leila think about this? She's leaving, the enclave of the eastern suburbs where she's made a life for herself, where she feels that's respectable. She's been living in this tiny little enclosed apartment where she feels safe. And now suddenly she's in a completely different environment. And of course, she looks at these rusted sheds and thinks, how dreadful. This doesn't look right. None of this feels good. So I think that honestly begins her feelings of, I'm not in the same world I used to be in, and I have no idea on how to cope with this. And I think deep down that panic for her sets in quite quickly. It feels like she's left civilization behind, even if she practically hasn't.
James is a fairly recently attached partner, if I can put it that way. But there's something about James that made me feel uneasy. He's attentive to Leila, but somehow a little bit thoughtless at the same time. His behaviour is often questionable. I didn't feel I could really trust him either. But does Leila really know James?
How do we ever really know anybody? I mean, it's a leap of faith, isn't it? It's such a wonderful question to say, does she really know him? Does he really know her? Not at all. I think their relationship is so interesting because he is very supportive. He is very attentive. And she is coming to him with things that are nonsensical to a person like James. And so I don't think either of them truly know the other person, because both of them are not willing to be vulnerable enough to let the other person see what's really going on too deep beneath the surface. Having said that, it was an interesting challenge to write his character, because to me, he feels fully developed. I completely understand lots of aspects around James, why he is the person that he is. I remember when I was in writing class, we were workshopping particular scenes, and I think I had a fairly early scene around James and Leila being workshopped, and one of the writers said, I really need to feel attracted to James. I really need to know why she's fallen in love with him. And so I sort of went back and re-engineered him a little bit, and I thought, yeah, what are the underlying motivations for him? What are the underlying motivations for her? And where did they truly connect? Because they have connected very intensely, but only at a certain point, and then everything else becomes hidden. And that's obviously where a lot of conflict between them arises.
There's also a curious relationship, perhaps a triangulation even, between Leila's relationship with James and her relationship with the landscape, with the place that she's living. There's this sense of isolation that builds through the novel, and that seems to exacerbate the difference between them. And I think she says, our relationship is laid bare in the remoteness of the farm.
It's very confronting, isn't it? She could ignore a lot of things with a lot of distractions back in the city. She didn't have to open herself up to James as much back in the city. And once they move out to the farm, it really becomes just you and nature. And that's, for a lot of people, a very tough place to be, because you suddenly become very naked and very vulnerable in the face of what this landscape is. It's just you and it's just the land. So I think Leila felt that incredibly deeply, whereas for James, he was so used to it because that was his entire upbringing. It's a more comforting place for him, but not for her.
She actually says that she doesn't belong in this house and the house doesn't belong on the land. And strangely enough, she connects that to her pregnancy, where she says, that baby didn't belong in my body.
Oh, you're breaking my heart. I feel so sad for Leila all the time. And I think it's because, it's a bit of a point of view too, where she's been put in a position with James where she thinks she wants to have a baby, and but it felt foreign to be pregnant, and then it didn't work out, which reinforces that negative feeling of I'm not the right landscape, I'm not the right nature for this growth. And then she's brought to a farm and she thinks, I don't belong here either. And to be honest, this house and this land, do any of us belong here? We all know how Australia was settled and the bloodshed and genocide that happened. We all know that we're living on by the grace of the land, honestly. And I think Leila even says that, because it's a very difficult landscape to live in Australia. It's extremely hot, it's extremely cold. There are extended periods of drought, there are extended periods of flooding and rain. Nature is an incredible power, and the landscape itself is not that conducive to human living. And I think she connects these things because she's thinking, at the most basic level, do we belong here? And at the most personal level, did my baby belong with me? Am I not meant to be a mother? And so that all sort of comes full circle for her in that realization.
One of the few things that Layla can rely on is her dog Rusty, the failed sheepdog, and consequently they become inseparable. Rusty is perhaps the only one that Layla seems to be able to trust.
And isn't that a beautiful summary of how dogs interact with humans, the way that we've domesticated them? They are just so loyal and they have so much love to give you. And I think there's a moment later in the book where Leila realizes why she's so deeply connected to and trusts Rusty. And it's because he's protective of her and there are no strings attached. And I know that he's a dog, but if anyone who's listening has a dog, they know you talk to your dog all the time. Your dog listens, your dog communicates with you constantly in non-verbal ways. And I think he is the character in the book, maybe just apart from Matt, who's maybe a bit more sort of on the fence, but Rusty is the character in the book that's basically saying to her, yeah, I'm with you all the way. I believe everything you're saying. And just having him as an ally, I think gave her so much strength in the end. And also he was based on my beautiful, beautiful dog Buddy that my husband and I shared, who did unfortunately pass away earlier this year, but he made it to a very respectable 13 years old. And I'm just thrilled that he's memorialized in the book as well.
As I read The Farm, it made me very aware of the power of the senses to inform, but also to misinform. For example, there's a persistent smell in the house, inexplicable. Strange sounds emerge from the walls. James seems to have an explanation for everything. When Layla thinks she sees a haunting bearded face in the woods, he puts it down to pareidolia. That's a new term for me, but I wondered, pareidolia or paranoia?
Bit of both, isn't it? And humans in general, pareidolia is probably born of paranoia because, we're always looking for patterns in order to best protect ourselves from elements, from threats, from danger. And he says to her, you're not used to being out here. You think you see a face in the trees, but it really was probably just the trees. And of course, not having his support on these unusual experiences really starts to chip away at the trust she has with him and in their relationship. Pareidolia is a fantastic term, and actually one that my husband mentioned to me. And I thought, that's fantastic. I have to use that because James is so used to all of these sounds, all of these smells and sights. That's all normal to him. But when you move out to a rural area, everything is different. Everything you experience, you touch, you taste, you feel, you see, you hear, it is all different. When I moved out to O'Connell, one of my favorite things is that there was this weird dragging noise in the ceiling here. And I started recording it because I was at home at the time. My husband was out at work. I'm thinking, am I imagining this strange, like full dragging sound? And I played it for him. And he said, oh, it's probably a snake in the roof. And I thought, oh, my goodness. So I rang a snake catcher and said, will you please come and, there's this dragging noise and can you get rid of it? And he said, oh, no, love, don't worry. It's just a lizard. Yep, it's a bit cold and you've had a monitor lizard come inside your roof to camp out for the season. And I said, oh, okay, could you come and remove him? He's like, no, why do you want to do that? You just have these bizarre different things that happen to you. And the even weirder part was that as I'd walk around the house, the lizard would follow me. And so I had to name him and just decide that he was my friend because he clearly wanted to be near me at all times. But when you're already in a bad way, the way that Leila is, those things aren't, funny. They're really nerve-wracking. And there's no one that can explain it to you.
Your imagery is quite powerful too. There's small but discernible pointers to something unpleasant that might unfold into the future. There's a mysterious black bird, the incongruity of the house on the bare land, skulls on gates and fences, dead animals, including a fish with a gaping jaw, a bloodied pig, all quite ominous in their effect, which reminded me that excessive space can be claustrophobic and that the familiar can be oppressive.
Absolutely. And those instances of death in the novel, the fish, the hunt that happens, the rabbits and the foxes and the kangaroos hanging from the fence line. And I know to readers who haven't read the book, this might all sound very intense and over the top. They are few mentions along the way, but these are all things that, apart from the hunting, I had seen when I moved out here. I remember I went for a walk with my dog at the time and I saw these foxes. I smelt them first. It was summer. I'm walking up a hill and I think, what is that dreadful smell? My dog's going crazy. And I walked over the hill and I saw these hanging bodies and it was dreadful. It was so macabre. No one talks about the fact that they do it. No one had ever said to me, oh, have you seen all the dead roos and the dead foxes on the fence up at, Grady's place or whatever? No one mentions these things. And I saw it and I thought, what a terrifying thing this is that you have to do. And I think when you live in the city, you're very divorced from the reality of what it takes to survive in this landscape and in this country. You buy your meat from the fridge section. You don't engage with the cows and see how they are and their personalities. You don't see the foxes that are just trying to survive, the mice that are trying to survive. So I really wanted that to feel very much real for the reader and to situate them in her exact feelings and her exact environment. And so that intense imagery I felt was necessary for her characterization and to keep readers in the moment with her.
Do you realise that with the farm, you might have cast a shadow of doubt in the minds of all of those contemplating a tree change?
Yes, I see these comments all over Instagram. You're exactly right. Everyone keeps saying, I can't go to the farm now. Even in my writing group from a couple of years ago, we're all still together. We all went through the Faber Academy together and there's 8 of us. And I'd say to them, oh, I've got plenty of bedrooms here. Come, we'll do a writers group session. It's only 3 hours away from Sydney. You can all come. And they'd all said, no, thank you. No, that sounds scary. I'm like, it's not. It's actually really beautiful. And partly because of Leila's feeling so emotionally isolated that she projects that onto the landscape. But I feel that I have frightened people off a farm life. If I may, I would encourage people to consider one. I actually do think that it has opened me up in ways that I didn't expect. Just even being around, as I said before, seeing, it sounds so silly and small, but seeing the cows, seeing the sheep, seeing the lambs, seeing where your food comes from, understanding how food even gets out here with the amount of trucks and pollution and all of the different systems that we have set up to divorce us from the way we live in a way is fascinating to learn about and to confront within yourself. And you don't have to do anything about it, but I do think living out here gives you that sense of equilibrium, that you are a little bit maybe more thoughtful about the things you do, the things you say, the things you consume, and just how you feel about, nature and our world in general. And I think that's only a good thing. So I encourage people to take their tree change opportunity and don't be frightened.
Jessica, it's been a great pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for joining me on the Good Reading Podcast.
It's been my absolute pleasure, Greg. Thank you so much.
I've been talking to Jessica Mansour-Nahra about her first novel, The Farm. It's published by Hachette, and you can find it at goodreadingmagazine.com.au. My name's Greg Dobbs, and thanks for listening. Subscribe to Good Reading print and online magazine at goodreadingmagazine.com.au.